Good morning. Arise and shine. The 1st of November 2024 marks the day when Kenya will have its third deputy president under the new constitution sworn in this morning. The action is happening at the Kenyatta International Convention Center after a series of legal battles and an exposure of efficiency, breakneck speed efficiency of the houses of parliament, ensuring that everything runs according to plan, including the government sending out a flurry of gazette notices. We'll speak about that today. The man of the hour is Professor Abraham Kithure Kindiki, who will this morning be sworn in as the deputy president to succeed embattled deputy president, now former Rigathi Gachagua. My guests are already with me in the studio. Eric Deuri is here, former president, LSK. Willis Otieno, deputy party leader, Safin, and also an advocate of the High Court. Titus Makanu, a lawyer as well, is here with us. We're still waiting for Dr. Eric Komola, advocate of the High Court, and Javas Bigambo, governance expert. But let's take a look at what the dailies are saying on a day when we'll give you wall-to-wall coverage of the events happening at KICC live in just a moment. And this is what they're leading with on the Standard front page. This is the Daily Nation, I believe. They say the second in command. That is a picture of Professor Abraham Kithure Kindiki, who was set to be sworn in this morning at the KICC. Let me show you what the Standard has on the front page. The Standard says, what awaits Kindiki? Abraham Kithure Kindiki will this morning be sworn in as the deputy president to succeed embattle Rigathi Gachagua, whose fate was sealed in a judgment yesterday lifting orders stopping the Interior CS ascension. The decision was music to the ears of the establishment, but a body blow to the impeached deputy president, whose aggressive fight back has so far yielded zero win. In fact, let me show you more on this. There's a quote there from Anthony Murima, who's a High Court judge. He says, we find that the constitutional framework does not envision any scenario in which the office of the deputy president would remain vacant except during the brief period required to fill a vacancy. All right, still on the front page there of the Standard, this is what they're still leading with. Irony of Kenya's low inflation but empty pockets. IMF's Kenya's warning as it releases 78 billion shillings. Abductions will soil Kenya's image, and hugs at Manu as Amorim plan on. All right, but let's focus on the events of the day today, and I'll bring in my guests with me. Before we do that, let me just give you a scenario of what happened yesterday. It is the end of the road for impeached Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua after a three-judge bench of the High Court vacated conservatory orders stopping Professor Kithure Kindiki's ascension to the Deputy President's office. The embattled impeached DP had moments earlier on suffered another setback in his survival bid after the Court of Appeal declined to issue interim orders suspending the hearing and determination of the impeachment proceedings by the High Court. Setolale has that report.
In its one-hour ruling, the three-judge bench of the High Court unanimously quashed conservatory orders issued by Justice Richard Mwongo of the Kerugoya High Court, preventing the swearing-in of Professor Kithure Kindiki as Deputy President.
Conservatory orders issued on 18th of October 2024 in Kerugoya High Court E015/2024 are hereby discharged and or set aside.
Justices Eric Ogola, Anthony Mrima, and Dr. Freda Mugambi stating that leaving the DP position vacant under the 2010 Constitution will create a constitutional crisis, and that issuing an order suspending a constitutional process will undermine the role of the judiciary.
Article 3 of the Constitution, where every person has an obligation to respect, uphold, and defend the Constitution. We choose to abide by that calling. As such, public interest demands that the office of the Deputy President should not remain vacant.
In establishing whether the High Court has jurisdiction in hearing and determining impeachment proceedings against Rigathi Gachagua, the court ruled that the Constitution grants the High Court powers to adjudicate whether any law is in contravention of the Constitution unless expressly prohibited by the same Constitution.
We do hereby find and hold that this court has the jurisdiction to sit and determine the matter that is before it.
As to whether the court found the issues raised justiciable, the three-judge bench inciting the case of former Embu Governor Martin Wambora versus the Speaker of the Senate at the Supreme Court ruled that the final determinant of any constitutional and legal proceedings lies with the judiciary.
that the judiciary's role in impeachment matters is not to take over legislative functions, but to ensure that such processes are conducted in a manner that respects constitutional norms and procedural fairness.
As to whether public interest tilts in favor of continuity of the Constitution, the Justice Eric Ogola-led bench ruled that it is in public interest to avert a constitutional crisis by suspending the conservatory orders, preventing a new DP from assuming office. As such, an order would have in effect suspended Article 147(2) of the Constitution, which assigns the Deputy President specific roles.
We find that the applicants do not stand to suffer any prejudice in the event the conservatory orders are not granted.
The Court of Appeal had earlier declined to issue interim orders suspending the hearing and determination of impeachment proceedings by the High Court. The Court of Appeal has scheduled 6th November 2024 as the mentioning date for another petition from Rigathi Gachagua in a bid to have the judiciary come to his rescue. Seth Olale, Citizen TV at the Milimani Law Courts, Nairobi County.
Now, the stage is all set for the swearing-in of Professor Kithure Kindiki as Deputy President after the High Court cleared the hurdles occasioned by the legal challenge by the impeached Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. Kindiki will now be sworn in this morning as from 10 a.m. at the Kenyatta International Convention Center right here in Nairobi. The government has declared today, which is Friday, a public holiday in line with the requirements of the law guiding the assumption of office protocols. Emmanuel To has more.
Song and dance in Runduni Village, Tharaka constituency, Tharaka Nithi County. The long wait is over and the party is on. The decision of the High Court has brought joy to the residents of this village, the birthplace of Professor Kithure Kindiki.
Niko na furaha sana kwa sababu kijana yetu Kindiki alikuwa vice president wa Kenya yote. Amekuwa saa hii, tunasikia sauti, atakuwa na atakuwa. Tuko na furaha sana, hata hatutalala leo. Tutakuwa tunashangilia huko. Na mpaka kesho. Na sio kesho, hata kesho kutu itakuwa. Hata mtondogoo.
Leo hata tunataka tupegwa nafasi hata ile pombe ya mikimila ya Kitharaka. Tunataka tukubarikwa leo tukunywe kiasi. Ili tuweze kusherehekea hapa.
Kindiki's brother, Isaiah Kindiki, who is the Vice-Chancellor of KCA University, could not hide his joy, thanking Kenyans for the support they have shown their kin thus far.
The people of Kenya, from a family perspective, I would say that thank you so much for giving my brother many opportunities to serve this republic. As a senator for Tharaka Nithi, he contributed significantly to the political development of the Senate.
Kindiki is being described as a hard-working and dedicated servant.
His commitment to duty, his beliefs and the faith in God, his trust in family, his trust in his people, the community of the Republic of Kenya and the leadership of Kenya. I expect that he will be helping the head of state to deliver on the promises that they made.
And in working with him, I found him to be a person who keeps his word. I wrote many papers with him, and there is no time when we needed to submit that he had not delivered his part. So he's diligent, he's conscientious, and I also know that he is also a person who is a firm believer.
This comes as the assumption of the office of the Deputy President Committee, chaired by the Secretary to the Cabinet, Mercy Wanjau, announced Kindiki will be sworn in tomorrow, Friday at 10 a.m. at the Kenyatta International Convention Center. The swearing-in ceremony, which must happen in public between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., will be presided over by the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, Frida Mukaya, witnessed by the Chief Justice, Martha Koome, or the Deputy Chief Justice, Philomena Mwilu. And in line with the guidelines of the assumption of the office of the DP committee, the acting CS for Interior Musalia Mudavadi has gazetted Friday as a public holiday for the swearing-in of Kindiki. After his swearing in, Kindiki is expected to make his inaugural speech as deputy president in a colorful event which will see him ascend to power, taking over from the impeached deputy president Rigathi Gachagua. The members of the Assumption of Office committee will now be burning the midnight oil to ensure the stage is set for the swearing in of deputy president-elect and designate Professor Abraham Kithure Kindiki to take over the reins as the third deputy president of the Republic of Kenya and taking over from the impeached deputy president Rigathi Gachagua. Emmanuel Tor, Citizen TV, KICC, Nairobi.
And just hours after the court issued a ruling that gives Kithure Kindiki a green light to be sworn in as the deputy president, a flurry of Gazette notices fast-tracking the process of swearing in have been released. The notices set Friday, 1st of November, which is today, as the swearing-in date and a public holiday. Musalia Mudavadi has been appointed Interior CS in acting capacity, as Melita Oletenges reports.
Sooner had the dust settled on the court's ruling, paving way for the swearing-in of the deputy president nominee Kithure Kindiki, than the wheels were in motion to install him in earnest. In a rapid-fire sequence, a flurry of Gazette notices were issued. Starting with Gazette Notice 14098, gazetting the Assumption of Office of Deputy President Committee, in line with the Assumption of Office Act. Chief of Staff Felix Koskei announcing the appointment of Mercy Wanjau, Secretary to the Cabinet, as the chairperson of the 21-member committee to facilitate the Assumption of Office of Deputy President nominee, and convened a meeting. Then came Gazette Notice number 14099, President William Ruto assigning Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi as the Acting Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Interior and National Administration. Gazette Notice 14100 then followed. The chairperson of the Assumption of Office Committee swung into action, notifying the public that the swearing-in ceremony of the Deputy President nominee shall take place on Friday at the Kenyatta International Convention Center. Gazette Notice 14101 by the Acting Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Interior and National Administration, Musalia Mudavadi, was the fourth Gazette Notice in quick succession, declaring Friday, the 1st of November 2024, a public holiday, being the day of the swearing-in of the Deputy President nominee. At the same time, the head of the Public Service, Felix Koskei, sent out an invitation to all chairpersons of state corporations, all chief executive officers of state corporations to attend the swearing-in of the Deputy President nominee, Kithure Kindiki, at the KICC on Friday. Then an invite to media houses to the swearing-in ceremony by the State House Press Secretary Emmanuel Talam. The swift Gazette notices forming a composite consideration of the procedures outlined in the Assumption of Office Act. Melita Oletenges, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Let's have the conversation with my guest already with me in studio. Eric Deuri is here, former president LSK, Willis Otieno, deputy party leader Safina, and also an advocate of the High Court. Dr. Eric Omolo is now joined us, advocate of the High Court, and Titus Makanu, a lawyer. Thank you so much for making time. We're still waiting for Javas Bigambo. As soon as he comes in, we'll rope him into the discussion. Let me hear your reactions to this entire situation that we are in right now, and I'll start with the order of arrival in studio. Willis Otieno was here first. Willis, what do you make of the three-judge bench? Did they make a mistake? Was their judgment in public interest?
You know, the greater public interest in this country is the respect of the Constitution and the rule of law. I don't think there can be any greater public interest than to apply the Constitution and the law. And to the extent that that court did make a finding that Gachagua had a prima facie case and that they had jurisdiction to hear that case, the natural order of things will have been that you preserve the substratum of the case that you have said you have jurisdiction to hear, a case that you've said prima facie is a solid case. Preserve its substratum and allow him his day in court. When you do that, then you bring confidence into the judicial process. Because what would have been the hurry? They could have as well concluded this matter even within a week. So, and the state will not collapse. And this argument that they end up then proceeding to say that you must conclude, I mean, you can never have the office of deputy president vacant. The same constitution provides in Article 149 a time frame of up to 74 days. Now, are the judges reading a different constitution than the one that Kenyans are reading? And you may not like Rigathi Gachagua, but in lynching him, you must respect his rights. Don't do things in a way that creates a perception that this is a lynch mob and you're simply trying to get rid of Gachagua in the fastest way possible. And you look at even the conduct of the executive post that ruling. The government printer, for the first time in the history of this nation, we have one government department that the most efficient, most effective, within a span of 30 minutes, it had dished out from different departments, different agencies and personnel, more than 5 gazette notices, declaring holidays, appointing assumptions of offices, and swearing-in. Why do all of this just to get rid of Gachagua? Give him his day in court, allow him his due process of the law. The danger with denying people an opportunity to a fair trial or a fair hearing is this. You create a perception that there's a problem with the justice system. It's no longer justice as we know it. The morality of the law is lost. People start losing confidence in the judicial process. And the last time we were in such a situation was in 2007, when people were told, after hurried swearing in, to go to court. They decided to say, we will give me my machete. We are going to hack each other down with machetes. Nobody wants to go back to the sad experience of 2007. We want a process where the courts should be the ultimate arbiter, and they should not shy away from dealing with this dispute, so that you give everybody an opportunity to present their cases, and then you make a determination. But if you are doing things to facilitate what is the problem, then you end up eroding the confidence of the people of Kenya in the courts. And coming in the background of a Supreme Court also making a decision the day before on the issue of the Finance Bill and the Appropriations Act 2023, you are seeing a court system that then also you had the housing levy decision that was made by the same courts, you had the shift share decision that was made by the same courts. You are seeing a perception being created, and it's emerging as a reality. People are feeling that William Ruto seems to be controlling these courts. Okay. Now, if people lose confidence in the judicial process, the only alternative they have ends up being street justice. And nobody wants that in this country.
Okay. Deudi, was it a fair judgment in your assessment? I know there were a series of court cases, but the one that ultimately lifted the sanctions against the swearing in of Professor Kithure Kindiki.
Yeah, I am yet to see the full text of that decision. But I want to say that for me, it's not a decision that has surprised me, in the sense that taking into context everything that has been happening, my position has always been that I feel that the court will be more inclined towards lifting those conservatory orders. And the reason is this, that the process in Parliament, howsoever anyone can say was shambolic, and of course there are questions about how that process was conducted. And when I talk about Parliament, I mean both houses, Parliament and the Senate, which is the trial chamber. There are definitely questions as to how the entire process, impeachment process, was managed. Then thereafter, Professor Kindiki was appointed. It went to Parliament, it was approved. There might be questions about how that process was done, but it is a fact that Rigathi Gachagua was impeached, and it was also a fact that Kindiki had been appointed as required under the Constitution in terms of the letter of the law, and had been approved through a vote in Parliament as required by the Constitution through the letter of the law. So, of course, there are questions, and those questions are still before the court. So that was the factual position. The second factual position was that the office was vacant in a manner that you could not tell, if there was an issue, who then would assume the office of the Deputy President. Let me juxtapose this with, for example, the situation in a place like Meru, where the governor has been impeached but is in office by virtue of an order of conservatory order. if for one reason, God forbid, Kawira Mwangaza is unable to discharge the functions of that office, we know who automatically takes in, that is the deputy governor. Now, in our situation, in the event, and I say this for argument purposes, that the president, for one reason or another, is unable to discharge the functions of his office, who would have taken over? Would it have been Kindiki? Would it have been Gachagua? And looking at that scenario in my own thinking, I felt that the court would be more inclined towards creating a situation where the answer to that question is certain. The then argument would then become what happens if then the court were to examine that situation and find that the process of impeachment was not conducted properly, the process of appointment of Kindiki was not conducted properly, then what will the court do? And I think that there are remedies that would be available in terms of, if you look at the wording of the Constitution, that allows the court the power to fashion any kind of order, including the so many orders that we know of, for purposes of remedying any violation of the Constitution. So looking at that, I was always of the feeling and of the view that the court is going to lift the conservatory orders. But let me say this, that the impeachment of Gachagua is going to have a lot of consequences.
Okay, we'll come to the consequences.
No, it's important for me to say this because of what Willis has said. And it has put Parliament, it has put Senate on trial, and currently the judiciary is on trial on this issue. So ultimately, when the final determination is made, as they deliver their verdict, there will also be a verdict that will be imposed by the Kenyan people on the judiciary.
Okay, this will impact the judiciary. Let me hear Titus, as you say. Titus, was this a fair ruling?
First, I will handle this issue from the basis that our courts, the way the legal system that we subscribe to is a common law legal system, which requires that judicial precedents are what guides courts when it comes to determination of issues before them. Now, on the issue of grant and issue of conservatory orders, already the Court of Appeal has set standards. There are cases which are so many as regards what a court needs to look at before granting conservatory orders and what the court needs to look at before lifting those orders. Of course, one of the most important issues that the court considers is, in the event that there is an appeal from a high court, will that appeal be rendered nugatory in the event that the orders are lifted, which therefore means the substratum of that matter shall have been lost. And that is the law. So from where I sit, I do not understand, I have not looked at the judgment in its entirety, and perhaps I look at it and understand what guided the judges into lifting the order. But one thing I know is that there will be a big problem in the event that the Court of Appeal overturns this decision of the High Court. Then that means the High Court was wrong. And most importantly, I did heard Justice Murima saying that the applicants have established a prima facie case. So they did conform to the rules, to the decisions that have already been set by the courts as precedent. That the moment you establish that a party has managed to establish a prima facie case, then the next thing that you need to do is obviously to allow the conservatory order so that you preserve the substratum of the issue. So in my opinion, it appears the High Court erred in making its decision. But as we've been told before, courts can make mistakes. And the good thing is that the High Court, in the chains of our courts, the High Court is a small court, and probably that decision can be reversed. So that is where I look at. But then the most important thing is this, and probably everybody will be left wondering. If the judiciary participates in the swearing in today of Kithure Kindiki, then at the tail end of the process, the swearing in and the assumption of office by Kithure Kindiki is found to be null and void. Doesn't that then indict the judiciary in participating in an illegality? That is the question that definitely I will leave for many people to ponder with.
And that's a good question. We'll actually ponder on that. But let me hear what Dr. Kumola has to say about this. What do you make of this judgment? Especially the one lifting the conservatory orders of swearing in of Professor Kithure Kindiki.
Thanks, Trevor. Being a judgment in a politicized environment, it was always going to split people one way or the other. It was always going to be controversial. But generally, it is unusual to lift conservatory orders when the real reason why they were issued has not been litigated fully. So I can understand why lawyers would say that perhaps it broke away from the norm. But my bigger concern is how we handle disputes in political parties in this country and how we bring in the judiciary. We tend to take a very purist approach to think that political parties do not have their biases, do not have their infighting, and that all those infighting in political parties should be resolved by courts. The truth is that if we had democratic political parties, then replacing their leadership should not be something to be litigated. We should not be spending 2-3 weeks debating about how parties replace their leaders and how then those leaders assume positions for parties that are in the majority, in this case, UDA. The fact is, this is a leadership fight in UDA. And it looks like the parliamentary party, in a functional democracy, and assume ours is a functional democracy, the parliamentary party never wanted Mr. Gachagua. The parliamentary party back in 2022 had proposed Professor Kindiki as opposed to Mr. Gachagua to be the deputy president. And that seems not to have changed for reasons that look to me to be internal to UDA. So my concern is that going forward we should probably look at this issue of bringing political squabbles into a arena of courts and making them human rights issues, and in the process putting the courts in a very untidy position, in a very awkward position, where we now have to look at constitutional aspects of human rights of Mr. Gachagua and Professor Kindiki, because both of them have legitimate expectation to rise to that office one way or the other. So it's difficult. It's difficult, I think. And the judges were in a very, very awkward position. The reasoning one way or the other could have gone one way or the other. Public interest, it depends entirely where you sit. You could as well say that public interest is in Mr. Gachagua remaining in office as his case is being litigated. That is one side. But at the same time, you could as well say that, objectively speaking, we need a president and deputy who work in harmony to effect their policy. You know, we didn't elect them. Kenyans didn't elect them to love each other. Kenyans elect them to implement their policies, and most of their policies, even in the newspaper you put before me today, most of their policies, one way or the other, need serious attention, from healthcare to issues of security and infrastructure. And when party leaders are squabbling, you obviously, attention is off those things. And over the last 1 month or so, I think attention has been largely off those things. So this is pure squabble in a political party, and we need a framework for dealing with squabbles in political parties, and do not make them serious national issues as we have at the moment.
Let me cross over to the Kenyatta International Convention Center, where the preparations are ongoing, and joining me live is now Emmanuel To. Emmanuel To, good morning. What is the situation looking like there? We've seen breakneck efficiency. Is that the same thing that we're seeing there right now? Is it all set?
Well, Trevor, of course, that has been the speed from the process when this impeachment process began. It has been warp speed, it has been breakneck speed, and that has been moved towards the making sure that the stage is set for this swearing in of Professor Kithure Kindiki as the third Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. And right now, this place is a beehive of activities. If my colleague Mauritius could just show you some of the activities here. The seats are being reserved. Members of the public have been told to wait on the other side, but these are some of the officials who are waiting to just ensure that things are going on smoothly. I've seen some of the members of the Assumption of the Office of the Deputy President Committee coming here to be ready for this, and that is the seat of the Chief of the Defense Forces who will be part and parcel of this. And of course, I just want to talk to one of the members of the Assumption of the Office Committee, that is Raymond Omolo, who is the PS for Interior, to tell us the preparations. How far are you ready for the swearing in?
Yes, we are ready for the swearing in. The program begins at exactly 10 when the Chief Justice will preside over the swearing in. As you can see, the stage is already set. The seats for the invited guests has equally been set. We expect everybody to be seated by 9 a.m. We have made adequate arrangements to take care of any security challenges that may be there. We have enough police officers to guide Kenyans who have come to participate in this swearing in. And we expect leaders from across the divide. Yes, yeah.
Okay. And you have been here from last night. How has it been? When did you start and to prepare this stage for this activity?
So the preparation began after the setup of the Assumptions of Office of the Deputy President Committee, which was chaired by the Secretary of the Cabinet, Madam Mercy Wanjao, last evening. So after that, we came here and we began the processes. That was around 7 p.m. So the teams have been working throughout the night, and you can see that they've been able to really push themselves to get us to this stage.
Okay. How many people are attending?
We are looking at 10,000, yes, 3,000 seated and another 7,000 standing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of what we expect for the benefit of the viewers, what do we expect once the DP designate arrives?
So the DP designate will arrive, and then of course after he arrives we expect His Excellency the President to also arrive, and then the program formally begins. There's a program that has been put in place. Of course, as I mentioned yesterday, this is a judiciary function, and the Chief Justice together with the Registrar of the Judiciary will preside over the event. So it is a very short program, just the swearing-in ceremony. Of course, there is the oath that the DP designate will take. After that, the Prime Cabinet Secretary will invite the DP designate to make a few remarks, and subsequently His Excellency the President will speak to the nation. And that will mark the end of the program. We then will proceed for a luncheon hosted by His Excellency the President for the Deputy President.
Okay. And lastly, how long do we expect this process to take?
Looking at roughly 1 hour.
1 hour? Yeah. So by 11 you were done?
Yeah. It's purely a judiciary function. And you know, judiciary have a way of doing their things. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, thank you very much. That is the PS for Interior, Raymond Omolo, who is also a member of the Assumption of the Office of the Deputy President Committee. And as he has already told you, this process will be very quick. It will be, as he has said, it will take about an hour and it will be done. And I just want to show you some of the preparations. The dice is being cleaned. There are some tapes that are being put there in place. There are some of the officers just ensuring that they're ticking all the boxes. They are crossing they're dotting the I's and crossing the T's to ensure that that process is seamless. And we have seen that happening. And there's a woman representative for Tharaka Nithi. You come from the county where the DP designate comes from, Mheshimiwa. Just start with the introduction for the viewers and tell us what are the expectations from the people of Tharaka Nithi. Quickly.
My name is Susan Ngoge Duyo Windru, the woman representative for Tharaka Nithi County. Today we are so delighted, as especially the people from Tharaka Nithi, and specifically the people from Tharaka constituency. We wish to thank the President of the Republic of Kenya, President William Samoei Ruto, for really actualizing the bottom up. Tharaka is a very marginalized place. They are the minority in the Tharaka County. We are so happy that the President has been very faithful. He has nominated Professor Kindiki like he promised, and now we have him as our Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. As the Tharaka community and Tharaka County, we offer him like a sacrificial lamb. We expect that Kindiki is going to unite the entire country, from Tharaka to Rift Valley to Central to Coast and everywhere. We are offering him as a sacrificial lamb to act like a father, like the Catholic priest is orphaned by the Catholic Church. We offer him to unite this country, and we hope that he will not be tribal. We are so happy, we are so delighted. This is a win for democracy. We are going to fight the historical injustices. Tharaka County has been so marginalized, and now having the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya from a small county as small as Tharaka, we are so happy, so delighted, so happy. We are all here. All right. Thank
you so much. I'll talk to you later. Let me just show the viewers some of the seats and the preparations that are happening here. These are some of the seats that will be occupied by those members who will be coming here. The cabinet secretaries. This is one reserved for a cabinet secretary. There's one for the Inspector General of the Police, Douglas Kanja. There's one for the Commander, Kenya Navy, and those service commanders will be part of these. There's one for the Vice Chief of Defense, and this area will not be accessible in the next few minutes because it will be, as already you're hearing from the background noise, these will be cleared from the public and it will be occupied by those leaders who will be coming here. So that is what we have from here, Trevor, and it is going to be a big hive of activities. We are told the DP designate will walk all the way to this place once he gets the opportunity to come in a few minutes before 10 a.m. and we'll be here to give you all those details. Back to you, Trevor.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. To Emmanuel Todd, they're speaking to us live from KICC, where you can see that they're getting ready for the inauguration of Professor Kithure Kindiki and to ascend into the office of the Deputy President. 10,000 guests expected, 3,000 seated and 7,000 of them standing around that area for this move. But let me bring in Willis Etienne on this. Willis, is there a way to undo what will happen today? Or does that ruling negate everything else? Because if the conservatory orders was for him not to be sworn in as Deputy President, the moment Professor Kithure Kindiki is sworn in as Deputy President, can you undo that in any other way?
No, the second point will be that once he's sworn in as Deputy President, he becomes now a presumptive President. I don't even see what the High Court will be doing. Because if it's a question of an election of a President, you'll see the next case, next week you'll see a PO file in the High Court saying that this matter should be canvassed in the Supreme Court, not the High Court. The High Court, in a way, shot itself in the foot. It was actually shirking jurisdiction in hearing this case through the back door. Because the moment he's sworn in, he's no longer now a Deputy President nominee. He's now a Deputy President in office. And the High Court cannot question the election of a person as a Deputy President. That belongs to the Supreme Court. Then you'll go to the Supreme Court, you'll be told you ought to have filed your petition within 14 days of the date of that election. 14 days have lapsed. They don't have jurisdiction. So the courts are running away from this dispute. Well, as much as it is a political contest, and we do accept that courts should not involve themselves in political processes, it is also equally important to understand the history of our nation and why sometimes you actually forced to go to court. Because if you leave this political contest to be purely solved using political solutions, that is when you invite anarchy. You invite a state of total breakdown of law and order. And all that, as we say, is that the process in court should accord the parties a fair opportunity to litigate their case. Even if you don't like Gachagua or don't agree with the substance of what he may have done or is accused of having doing, you don't deny him that fair opportunity to be heard, to present his case. Treat him with the decency that any human being who deserves or who is entitled to the rights in the Constitution should be treated with.
Okay.
In this particular case, I see what has happened to the former Deputy President. Yeah. It's a lynch mob. Okay.
I'll come to you to finish that thought in just a bit because we have some technical challenge with the microphone. We'll sort it out in just a short while. But let me bring in Theory on this. Theory, what is your reading of this? I asked whether this then negates all the other cases. What happens today? if the swearing-in continues as is scheduled, is there a need for any of the other cases, really?
Yeah, then the need for those cases is there. And I say this perhaps from a very selfish legal view. We have very little jurisprudence on impeachment. And I think that in terms of settled positions in law, you have a lot of controversies, legal controversies that are still unresolved. The first question is that the obvious question, the political doctrine question which has been posed before the court, is whether the court should actually intervene in this kind of process that, in a sense, has a political tone in the recognition that for anyone to be impeached, they must have lost political support. Because the threshold for impeachment is 2/3 of the members. The motion is approved 2/3 in Parliament and 2/3 in the Senate. And so anyone who is facing an impeachment motion is required at the minimum to garner 1/3 support so that he is not impeached. So if that person is unable to gain that support, although yes, we have the Constitution that guarantees all these questions in terms of fairness and all that, how do you balance those two things? Because the purpose of impeachment, and if you look at impeachment from a very historical context, it was like a vote of no confidence. And when does a politician suffer a vote of no confidence? A politician suffers a vote of no confidence when the people or his political party no longer believes that he holds the ideals or he is implementing the measures that the people want. So that where it is the people who have lost confidence, it's a question of a government that is unable to discharge its function. Where, for example, it is the political party, it is that the politician is unable to work with these other members of the political party to drive an agenda that they all believe in. So if you look at that, and that being the purpose of an impeachment, then the question of whether the court should intervene or restrain themselves, as happens in the United States and as happens in other countries, is something that we may want to see in terms of jurisprudence coming from the courts, giving us guidance on what is going to happen. Remember, Trevor, we operate on a system of precedent. And this situation is not just applicable to the deputy president, although it is applicable now, but it is a precedent that in future, if we ever have to impeach either a president or a deputy president, then we need to know which route we should follow. So that's one of the things that I think that is critical. Second, that there is a consequence of impeachment. And we would also want the court to pronounce itself. First of all, was the process fair? Were there any procedural issues that were overlooked? And was the Constitution complied with in the impeachment process? So that is also something that is extremely important. And then at a personal level to the impeached Deputy President, Mr. Honorable Rigathi Gachagua, he is barred from vying for office for a certain period. So for him, if he intends to remain in the political sphere, which perhaps is an area that may appeal to him, he may still wish to proceed with the determination of this case, so that if the court then arrives at a finding that he was impeached unconstitutionally, that then he regains the opportunity to be able to vie again and become a relevant political player in the politics of this country. So I think for those three reasons, largely in terms of the country and the constitution and our body of law with regards to impeachment, and also the personal consequence that will face the Honorable Rigathi Gachagua. I still think that there is something that has to be debated in this manner. But we have a problem. And the problem is that a few years back, a 5-bench of the High Court made a ruling that any questions with regards to the suitability of someone assuming office in the either office of the president or deputy president in the cases that were filed in the High Court to challenge the eligibility of the then candidate William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta were questions that can only be determined at the Supreme Court. And so we would also be curious to see how this current bench is going to deal with that question, because obviously the question of the appointment of the Honorable Kindiki, insofar as he had not assumed office, was a live question. But now that he has assumed office, an attempt to remove him would be an attempt to question his qualification. So are we going to see a situation where the High Court, one, will claim it has not have jurisdiction, and secondly, in the event that somebody now decides to file a case at the Supreme Court to challenge the suitability of once Kindiki takes office, again, it might be something interesting. So I don't think that we are at the end of the road with regards to this issue of the impeachment, and I foresee a situation where our courts are going to find themselves in very awkward situations, because whereas there are legal questions that ought to be addressed, we must always remember that these legal questions will largely be seen from the political prisms of Kenyans, and we have a society right now that is so engaged. Information is percolating to the larger section of the society through use of social media and technology, to the extent that this process is one that may actually give birth to something extremely interesting in this country, and it is a space that we have to watch and see how it's going to develop.
So we're in uncharted waters here. And Titus, so does the swearing in today render all the other cases null and void?
No, the swearing in does not render the other cases null and void, but the ripple effects are that do you really foresee a situation whereby Kithure Kindiki will just easily give in to a decision by the High Court that his swearing in was in an illegality? Obviously no. What we foresee is that he may use the channels available in law to appeal all the way to the Supreme Court for purposes of course, technically keeping Gachagua out of office and from the notion that he may ever get back to office. And remember, the timelines within which this government is supposed to run is going to run up to 2027 or thereabout. So practically, it becomes very difficult for Gachagua to ever imagine that even if he wins these cases, he can get back to office. The bare minimum that he should expect is that probably he's going to clear his name and fight that fundamental impediment that he cannot hold any public office in future. Because the channels as provided in law puts Kithure Kindiki at an advantage, the position that Gachagua was at the time the conservatory orders were in place. So the swearing in does not render the other cases null and void, but the practicability of reversing what has happened is next to impossible.
Okay, before I bring in Javas Bigambo, who's now joining us here as a governance expert, we had an issue with your microphone, Willie, so we can just bring this up again. Is there a way to undo what happens today?
In my view, I don't see any legal way of undoing what has been done. Because what will have been the logical thing to do will have been for the court to preserve the substratum of the petition by maintaining the conservatory orders. Then you hear the parties on their merits and you make a determination. But the moment you lift the conservatory orders, then you proceed to say that the petition is prima facie a solid petition, you are now telling Gachagua and the legal practitioners that let us engage in an academic exercise. And that is something that courts shun every day. It has now reduced the litigation before it to be purely an academic exercise. And even the question that I had my colleague Titus mention it, that what remedy can Gachagua get out of court? There are those who are arguing that if he succeeds in court, he may not get back the office, but he may be, the impeachment may be allowed to buy. No, the courts don't have that power. The latitude, the constitution is very clear. If you are removed from office by operation of this constitution, you are not entitled to run again.
But if the court finds that you are removed, the process was
then
not right.
The only remedy available to him, if the manner of your removal was not right, is to take you back to that very office.
But there'll be someone over there.
So that is now the quagmire, the legal quagmire that the courts are creating. Because you cannot find that the removal of Gachagua violated the constitution. And then you fail to give him what we call the natural consequence of that finding. The natural consequence of it is you find him to have been illegally removed, then he must take back his seat.
But then someone will be sworn in that seat.
And that is what, in my view, the court should have avoided that kind of a scenario. In fact, what they will say, they should actually then proceed to declare the appointment of Kithure Kindiki illegal, null, and void, and reinstate Gachagua. But politically, as Titus says, that is almost an impossibility. I'd say this from the outset. I do not see the courts intervening in this way to save what is largely a political contest. What my beef is with the courts in this particular instance is they also seems to be bending over the precedents and the practice of law as we legal practitioners know it. They are not adhering to the precedents that they have set before. They seem to be in a haste to facilitate a process that the politicians are very happy with. We are simply saying, impeach Gachagua, remove him, but let us apply the law as we all know it, as we've practiced it in these courts over the years. If you say that somebody who has proved that they have a prima facie case and you have jurisdiction to hear his case, then preserve the natural consequences. You preserve the substance of that case, hear the petition on merits, then dismiss it, if so desired. That is what we know how it's always done. If you say that someone was not given a right to be heard by the Senate, someone is entitled to the right to be heard, and this right to be heard is an absolute right under Article 25. It can never be taken away. Then say, Senate, go back and hear this man, give him an opportunity to respond, then vote the way you know it. If politically he is impeached, but let us not also impeach our legal process because we want to get rid of an individual. That individual, in terms of getting rid of him politically, he will have been gotten rid of even if the Senate had him. He will have been gotten rid of even if the courts gave him a fair hearing. All that I'm crying for is that let us not be in a hurry to kill the institution of the judiciary by taking what appears, the perception that comes out, to be political positions to facilitate the political class. That will undermine our legal system as we do know it.
Okay, let me go straight back to KICC, and things are moving really fast. Just a moment ago, there were just empty seats there. You can now see members of the public coming in. They're supposed to be seated at exactly 9. It's just about an hour to go. And let's join Emmanuel To. Emmanuel To, good morning. It's good to see you again. What's happening right now?
Have you been invited?
Emmanuel, are you there? But either way, we can still see what's going on there. There's quite a number of the members of the public coming in. The Raymond Omolo, who's the PS for Interior, had said that they're expecting a delegation of 10,000 people, 3,000 of them seated and 7,000 of them standing around the KICC where the inauguration is happening. So you can see these members of the public being searched. Thorough security is already there as they walk in and move into the venue of the inauguration. Any moment from now, at exactly 9, according to what the PS Omolo said, the Deputy President nominee will be there. and then the president will come in. It's a judicial function, so they're the ones who will run the program, and it will be a very short program. There'll be no speeches. It's just the swearing in. The deputy president then will be called to make his maiden speech, and then the president will also make a speech, and that will be it for the day. And with that, it will be a wrap-up for the inauguration. Let me bring back Komolo on this. You know, Komolo, the issue here was there was an attempt by the legal team to try and avoid the quagmire that Willis is talking about. That if the process goes to the end and you find that the Deputy President Gachagua was not removed in accordance with the law, what then do you do after someone else, Professor Kithure Kindiki, has already been sworn in as the Deputy President? And they brought in the issue of the Matthew papers. First of all, what was that? In layman's terms, what were they referring to?
In simple terms, courts have jurisdiction to issue orders, but then they can suspend the effect of the orders for a certain period. In this case, they were asking for about 6 days, I think to 6th of November.
So in layman terms, they would say that they're lifting the orders barring Professor Kithure Kindiki from being sworn in,
yes,
but then they hold that lift for 6 days.
Yes.
So essentially, they're still,
yes.
So it's still a stay order.
In effect, it's a stay order in terms of implementation of any consequences that come from lifting of the conservatory orders. And by the way, it is a regular thing that lawyers do in case they are dissatisfied with a decision that the court has done. I think what complicated is bringing the Matthew element to it, which made it unnecessary legalese.
But isn't that what the former Attorney General said as circumlocucious argument? Because then I had Domiti Ankolu saying that can we then also then ask you to remove those conservatory orders again?
Oh, you know, it's very easy to understand where they're coming from. When you're a beneficiary of an order of the court, then of course you want it to take effect immediately. When you are on the opposite side, you want the right to appeal and the effects of the order not to take place. So if by the way, if the AG was on the other side, they will as well have applied for the same order, the Madhu order that we are talking about.
Yeah.
Those are dynamics of legal practice. Let's get to the politics of the day, which is that Professor Kindiki is going to be the deputy president. Mr. Gachagua still has legal recourse, in my opinion, to kind of try to undo the potential effect of impeachment, which means that he cannot hold public office. But this is going to take time. For all this to be processed up to the Supreme Court, you are talking about another 1-2 years. So in real politics, it is the fact that he will not go back to that office, at least not during the term of the current government. But if I were in his team, I would fight hard, because he's still relatively young, around 58, 59. And I think perhaps still has some political future, or at least political capital to reap from. So I would fight very hard to remove that badge of impeachment that, you know, has kind of curtailed the career of Sonko and YT too.
So that's his own remedy now?
I think so, because the politics has moved. And you know, Trevor, one of the things we deny in this country is that since we are a multi-ethnic society, where political base is largely regional is a diplomatic word, it's largely ethnic-based. Always, for a government to succeed, there's need to build coalitions. And coalitions are not bad things. If we had a more formal political space, then parties will come with their policies and harmonize them and come up with coalition. Like now, we may not be admitting it, UDA and ODM are essentially in a coalition government. For you and I, who are ordinary citizens, what we'll benefit from is when they harmonize the issues they agree on from ODM side and from UDA side and implement. For example, if they want reforms in healthcare, these are the things we should be talking about so that we see what they achieve and then we judge them in 2027. The problem here is that we are in denial. We think that we are a united country under some national values and all these things that are just on paper. In real politics, is that people go for their interest, and interests revolve around political power. And that is what, of course, has cost Mr. Gachagua, and that is what those who remain in government are fighting for. So there will be realignment for sure. There will be new appointments. We don't know who is going to be the next interior cabinet secretary, but that is going to be determined purely by political interests at stake.
Okay.
So you know, all this imagination that Mr. Gachagua is going to get back to power before 2027 through some kind of judicial innovation is, I think, loose talk. I think it's a waste of practical time.
So it's not going to happen?
It's not going to happen. I mean, the two main parties in this country is ODM and UDA. They are together. What are you waiting for?
Hold that thought. Let me cross over to KICC.